welcome to the latest episode of the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. My name is Hunter Baumgardt, your host. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. Feel free to like the Facebook page as well, Hunter Baumgardt Sports. I'll give you all the updates on the podcast there. And remember, you can watch or listen to the podcast. You can watch on YouTube or listen on SoundCloud. Simply search Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. Well, fall is here. Happy fall. It was officially fall on Tuesday, and we're more than 2 weeks into the NFL season. So I thought today let's talk some Packers football. And today we're going to talk Packers football with Perri Goldstein, who is a host of the Pack's What She Said podcast and also the Pack-A-Day podcast with Andy Herman and others. They release a podcast every single day of the year. And she does work with Game On Wisconsin, where they live stream some videos on Twitter. So follow Game On Wisconsin as well. And we'll talk about all that with Perri, and she'll reiterate what she does. But really excited to talk with her about this Packers team. They're 2-0. They face the New Orleans Saints this weekend. We'll talk about, we'll preview the game against the Saints, look back at what they've done well, what they've done not so well in these last couple of games, talk about Aaron Rodgers and his level of play, and also Matt Lafleur 8-0 in the NFC North. Is she surprised by the start that Matt Lafleur has had here with the Green Bay Packers? Let's talk about all of that with Perri Goldstein right now on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. Joining me on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast this week is Perri Goldstein. She is a host of the Pack's What She Said podcast and also a host of the Pack-A-Day podcast, which releases a Packers podcast every single day of the year, and also does some Packers work with Game On Wisconsin as well. You can follow her on Twitter at Perri_Goldstein. Perri, really appreciate your time today and excited to talk some Packers football with you.
Yeah, Hunter, thank you so much for having me on. I'm really looking forward to it too.
No problem at all. So I want to ask, I know you live in New York, so what made you a Packers fan and get connected with Andy Herman and doing the Pack-A-Day podcast?
Sure. So I born and raised in New York, so actually have no family ties to Wisconsin.
Sure.
But my grandfather, he loves sports, but he loves sports because he loves to gamble. And so never really rooted for one team. So my dad was able to kind of choose his teams, and grew up. He was 7 years old when the Packers won the first Super Bowl. And obviously as a young kid watching Bart Starr, it just sort of won him over, and there was really no going back after that. And he made it through the drought of the Packers in the 70s and 80s, and then when my sister and I, it was kind of never an option for us to root for anybody else. One of my favorite stories is when my uncle came over once. I must have been like 6 or 7 years old. He tried to teach me the JETS, 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 Jets chant, and my dad pulled me aside and was like, "We don't say that in this house."
Oh my God.
So very kind of indoctrinated, and it's definitely been something that has kept my dad and I quite close. And so I started, I came to Pack-A-Day and honestly Twitter. Sometimes I don't really know how all of this happened. I really downloaded Twitter as a way to just get more information on the Packers, because I feel like that's where your one-stop shop for all of knowledge and articles, etc. was. And I started mainly just following people and reading, and then couldn't help myself and started tweeting. And as a New York Packers fan, there really aren't that. There are a few of us, right? But the community is quite small. And so I actually got to meet Aaron Nagler and Corey Behnke of Cheesehead Cheese, because they're also in New York. And so started working with them, and Pack's What She Said came first, and then sort of opened me up to the rest of the Packers community, and got to meet Andy Herman. And that's sort of how I ended up on Pack-A-Day. Happened very quickly though.
Sure. Well, that's awesome. And I bet you enjoy it, being able to just talk about Packers and doing your different podcasts. What is the community, the Packer community like in New York? I'm guessing, like you said, it's very small.
It is small. There's 3 kind of main bars that people go to. The one that I go to happens to be uptown, and it's really nice. I find that when you go and sit with people, even if they're strangers, it's just a level of camaraderie that is sort of unspoken. And I always like when on game days, people from Wisconsin who are in New York want to find a place to watch the game. It's locals and Wisconsinites alike sort of get together and talk Packers. It's really nice. It's really fun.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about your role specifically with the Packs What She Said podcast, and then, Game On Wisconsin, of course, Pack a Day. Like, not everyone knows about these great, Packers content creators, but they're awesome and they're great content for Packers fans. So tell me a little bit about what you do with them and then how people can find it.
Sure. Yeah. So I co-host Pax What She Said with Maggie Loney, who is based in Wisconsin.
Okay.
And we started in February, right after the season ended. So we went through draft, combine, season together, free agency, and now the season's starting. So this is really our first season kind of covering the games each week. We do a nice sort of recap of the game and then a preview of how we think the upcoming game is going to go every week. And that typically comes up every weekend, Friday or Saturday, it'll come out. And it's on all streaming platforms and Cheesehead TV. Pack a Day with Andy and Alex Strofe is every other Monday, and we record right after the game Sunday night. So it's usually like those immediate reactions
from
the game, like haven't been able to go and rewatch it or look back. It's just sort of like, okay, as I was watching, like what did I see and what do I think? And that's been really nice. I love chatting with them. I know you've been able to talk to Andy. He's so knowledgeable.
Yeah.
And then Game On Wisconsin is new. It's definitely a more kind of video focused platform. So a lot of there is, of course, articles and writing, but I find that the real meaty content comes from all the videos that we have, live shows every single day. And Maggie and I have that Monday nights. It's a happy hour. So it's a very relaxed sort of conversational, Maggie and I talk about the Packers pretty much every day together. We talk all the time. And so we decided to just put that in video form and let people join us. And we have questions and we answer people's questions throughout the show and just kind of walk through the game. But it's very informal and very relaxed. And we just like to have people come and join us and chat together.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know people really enjoy the content, and I was watching some of it this morning and preparing for the interview, and it was awesome. So I highly suggest people to check it out at Game On Wisconsin on Twitter. So let's get into some Packers discussion, kind of on the field stuff first. Start more of a general question for it. Packers are 2-0. They've looked really good doing it. What has excited you the most about this team after watching these first two games?
Yeah, definitely the way the offense is running.
Yeah.
I think that Matt Lafleur in last year and over the course of this offseason talked a lot about this illusion of complexity, and nobody really knew what that would actually look like or what that would translate to on the field. And he's really a phenomenal play caller. I hope that people around the league are noticing and kind of bringing him into this discussion of one of the best coaches in the league right now, because dropping 40 plus points on not just opposing teams, but division rivals who know you quite well is very impressive. I really love what he's doing with rotating all the personnel. And I find that it's a lot of the same routes or the same packages, but just sort of rotating players in and out. And I feel like he's really getting the entire offense involved. Clearly Aaron Rodgers has bought in, and he's, playing in rhythm and really back to some sort of vintage level playing from him. And of course, we've gotten so many years of like Hall of Fame level quarterback play. And recently I think there's been a little bit of a narrative of, what's Aaron Rodgers' end of his career going to look like? Is he declining? Is he still who he is? And I think we're very lucky to see that he's still who he is and he can still play at a very high level. And so definitely excited about that and going to appreciate it for as long as we have it.
Yes, exactly. Completely agree. And I've just absolutely loved watching the last two games. It's just been different because Rodgers before this season, the last 2 to 3 years, it was just different watching him. Unfortunately, it was like, and you expect every player to get worse a little bit in their, latter years of their career. But it was like, missing some open receivers, not throwing to the open receiver. That was a big argument, of course, with McCarthy and then transferring over to Lafleur. And then it's just like these first two games, like, whoa, wait, he still has this in him? Like, whoa. So that's been super fun to watch. Do you think, how different does he look to you compared to the last couple of years?
Yeah, way more confident, way more comfortable. I think that, he's doing some things that we've seen before. He still makes magnificent throws and magnificent plays. But I think, something that you mentioned is kind of, he's not holding the ball as much. He's actually finding open receivers. He's spreading the ball around to not just the receivers, but the tight ends, the running backs. He seems like he's really like just a master of everything that's happening on the field right now. He's actually attacking the middle of the field, which we haven't seen in a really long time from him. So I don't know what he saw on that tape that he supposedly watched from 2010, but whatever it is, if it was footwork, if it was timing, if it's something that I don't know, whatever tweak he made, it's working.
Yeah, and he's holding that close to the vest. I know he does his weekly interview on the Pat McAfee show, and he is not saying it, although he's teasing it every week. Like maybe next week he'll let us know. But yeah, that could be the difference. He also says he's loving life right now, which is awesome, and just that brings in the confidence on the field as well. Perri Goldstein joining us here on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. I want to get back into Matt Lafleur for a second. 8-0 in the NFC North, 15-3 in the regular season. When they hired Lafleur, what was kind of your reaction, and did you see this great of a start coming in the first year in a couple games?
I didn't really have a reaction. He was kind of an unknown name.
I feel the same. Yeah,
we heard a lot about like, he comes for the Sean McVay tree, and he's worked in Atlanta with Matt Ryan, and to me. And maybe this is sort of blind faith, and you have that a little bit as a fan, but I very much trust the Packers front office. I think that from Mark Murphy down, we do a very good job of like controlling that aspect of the team. And so when they made that pick, I was like, okay, you know what? Clearly, we had a lot of interviews. Everyone was vying for Josh McDaniels or these big names. Like clearly the Packers saw something in Matt Lafleur that they felt was better than some of those like large names that they could have brought in. So I had faith. Did I think that it would be as successful this quickly? Absolutely not. I definitely tempered my expectations. Did not know what it would look like. And yet here we are where we have yet to lose in the division over the course of his tenure. And we went 13-3 last season and are clearly off to a hot start. So I like his attitude. I think that he's clearly a leader, and not in the sense of someone who's, that John Gruden type, but a more calming, tempered. He very fits like what you expect a sort of Packer personnel person to be. And clearly has the respect of everyone in that locker room. So I wouldn't say I had any kind of reaction because he was a little bit unknown, but I'm certainly happy with the results.
Yes, me too. And I think you have to be as a Packer fan, whether you like the hire at the time or not. Like you said, I think it was a lot of unknown for a lot of Packers fans, and just kind of, okay, let's kind of see what this guy can do. He was a coordinator before. He wasn't, so I was just fascinated to see what would happen, and super excited for what this year could be. Are the Packers, do you think, after watching these first couple of weeks, obviously you had some other teams that have played well, the Rams, the Seahawks, are the Packers the cream of the crop so far in the NFC? Do you see a team that's head and shoulders better than the Packers right now, or are they up there with any other team that they could compete with in the NFC?
Such a good question. I've actually been thinking about that because I look at the power rankings every week, and the Packers have they've creeped up from top 10 to kind of top 5 now. And I think they are. I think it's hard. I have my concerns a little bit on the defense. I think the sooner we can get Kenny Clark back, the better. Yeah. But I see our top contender right now, honestly, being the Seahawks. Russell Wilson is on an absolute MVP campaign right now. And, their offense has come out guns blazing as well. So, but it's 2 weeks. I think, unfortunately, injuries have plagued teams to the point where it's completely changing the entire landscape of the NFL. And I think that health this year is going to play a large role in whether people win or not. So I knock on wood and cross my fingers for the Packers players to stay as healthy as possible. But absolutely, we are, top. And I thought this going in, and now seeing the offense after 2 games, like absolute Super Bowl contenders.
Yeah, for sure. And I think San Francisco is a team that comes to mind when you talk about the injuries that we just saw them go down with a bunch of them last week. And it's like they were, in all likelihood, the favorite again to represent the NFC. And then you think about, okay, Wow. I mean, those injuries, not only, you can lose one of the players, or you can lose maybe, one of your running backs or something, but Garoppolo is now hurt. Mostert's now hurt. Bosa's out for the year. Solomon Thomas out for the year. So it's like that team is going to look drastically different when it comes to late in the season, and can they win enough games to win that NFC West that looks to be shaping up to be super competitive, with the Seahawks and Rams both starting really, really well. I want to get into the defense a little bit. Like you mentioned, they've been a little so-so first couple of games. Of course, much better after the first quarter against Detroit on Sunday. But does giving up 34 against the Vikings, and then, the ease in which Detroit kind of scored on those in the first quarter on Sunday, does that worry you going forward?
No. Yes and no. I think the Detroit game, to me, one of the things about Pettine that I wanted to see in this season with him is kind of two main things. One is, can he make in-game adjustments? Because I felt like he didn't do that quite well last season. And then two is, like, can we finish out 4 quarters? The first piece, I think he really showed in the Detroit game.
Yes.
Whatever changes he made at halftime for the second half of that game, I think it was part players, like Chandon Sullivan came out and looked like a completely different player in the second half, right? Preston Smith and Za'Darius and Rashawn were finally getting pressure on Matt Stafford. So I think that Pettine's in-game adjustments showed up, and that's promising to me. Though the piece about, finishing games off, we haven't seen yet. I think a little bit in the Lions game, but, letting the Vikings score 24 points in the fourth quarter, we can't do that. And I understand, it's garbage time. We were already winning by a lot, but, finish the game out, finish out the game strong. It's never over until it's over, as we saw with the Cowboys-Falcons game, right?
Right.
I think that those are the two things that I'd definitely like to see from Pettine, but I think we really do have the personnel to have a top 10 defense.
That makes sense. And Mike Pettine has kind of been, he's been good, but he hasn't been that, super great, coordinator that we want him to be. And now hopefully with the personnel, like you said, that they can put it all together. Perri Goldstein joining us on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. I want to move a little bit to a topic that's been constant. And this is obviously, going to be a talk all year and then into the offseason, is what do they do, with Aaron Jones, with David Bakhtiari, Corey Linsley, some of these guys who are going to be free agents. Not so much who you would sign, but what do you think the Packers must do with those guys to stay competitive in the next few years? And obviously, probably Aaron Jones after that Detroit game might be on the forefront of the mind after that one.
Yeah, it's hard because if I had my way, I'd keep all 5 of them,
right,
which is just like a cop-out answer. But I think you have to look at it positionally and what positions that are open are the most important. And to me, David Bakhtiari is a must sign because he is the best left tackle in the game. And you do not find David Bakhtiari's on trees. And he's not I think the Packers have a little bit of a, what's the word I'm looking for? Pattern of not giving that extra contract to our offensive linemen once they reach that 30 mark. But David Bakhtiari is not 30 yet, and he's still playing at such an incredibly high level. So my number one is Bakhtiari. After that, I can understand the case for each of them for a yes and a no. Aaron Jones to me is not your typical running back. He does so much more for us. He is a pass catching back. He's super dynamic. He's gotten a lot better in pass pro. He's so well rounded, but I do understand the fact that you can find running backs a little bit easier. So positionally, I think left tackle is by far and away the most important. I think Corey Linsley has played unbelievably well this season. And again, cohesion across the offensive line, especially with an older quarterback like Aaron Rodgers, and protecting him is also really important. And I don't think Corey Linsley would be that expensive either. So I'd say offensive line is the one I'm looking towards. I also would love to keep Kevin King because I think that our base 4 in the secondary works really, really well together. I don't love the carousel of cornerbacks that they're gone through over the last few years. And if they work right now, let's not do that again. But again, I understand wanting to move on if he prices himself out of staying in Green Bay.
Yeah, that makes sense. And getting into Aaron Jones for a second, a lot of talk of with running backs is you sign to a big contract, but that does it pay off in the end for the team because a lot of running backs can kind of hit a wall and go downhill. How do you think about that in your mind? Would you be worried if they gave Jones a long-term contract that he could possibly, or does he look too good that no, I don't think he's going to go downhill anytime soon?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think every back is different, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that the way that the Packers kind of deal with their backfield, it's very backfield by committee, and I think that's
Mm-hmm.
to the benefit of Aaron Jones to preserve his body. We saw him be a little injury prone, and then since he's bulked up, he's been,
Mm-hmm.
way stronger and safer in that way. And I I don't know. I think that he's still young, and I think like any longer than a 4-year contract would be way too long
Mm-hmm.
because running back is you get hit more than any other player on offense. So I wouldn't want to see anything like that. I don't foresee the Packers giving him an Alva Kamara, Dalvin Cook like
Mm-hmm.
contract, even though I think he's a better back than both of those guys. That money to me just doesn't make sense. Um, but I hope for his sake he gets the bag because he's a phenomenal human being.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that maybe that lends itself to maybe the Packers not signing him because they wouldn't give him that type of money?
I've been thinking about that, and I don't see Aaron Jones being the kind of back to hold out or go
Mm.
elsewhere just because he's going to get more money.
Mm.
He's voiced that he likes playing in Green Bay. He
Mm-hmm.
likes putting down roots there. He just had a son. I think there's
Mm-hmm.
more to the decision than just can I get the most money possible. Obviously with Green Bay, he has every opportunity to win a Super Bowl ring, so
Yeah.
there's a few more factors than that. And I from what I've heard from him, I can see the Packers and his agent kind of finding a nice middle ground on a contract.
Sure. That makes a lot of sense. Perri Goldstein joining me on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. You can find her work at the Packs What She Said podcast and, of course, the Pack a Day podcast as well, and Game On Wisconsin. Let's move a little to this weekend's game against the Saints on Sunday night, which should be a lot of fun. Saints coming off a Monday night loss to the Las Vegas Raiders, which still sounds weird. But so this is going to be an interesting one. What are some of the things you're looking at as we go through this week as a couple of keys for the Packers to win this one? Because, the Saints coming in, they beat the Buccaneers in week 1 at home, then lost to Las Vegas. A lot of talk is about how Drew Brees is looking older than ever. What is kind of some keys that you're looking at for this Packers team to go and get a win in New Orleans?
Yeah, I do not write the Saints off by any means.
Mm-hmm.
I don't look at this Monday night game as any sort of like decline. I think the beginning of the season there can be fluke games. The Saints historically, honestly, usually have like one sort of very fluky game, and then
Mm-hmm.
they end up being contenders no
Yeah.
matter what. Um, I think we need to stop Alvin Kamara.
Mm-hmm.
I think whether or not Michael Thomas plays is a huge
Yeah.
game changer, because if he's in the game, obviously the scales lean a little bit more towards the Saints. Honestly, that my matchup to look for, which I guess is a preview for Packs What She Said, because we talk about this, is Mike Pettin versus Sean Payton. Sean Payton is a phenomenal play caller. He's got a ton of weapons, regardless of if Michael Thomas is in the game or not. We know what Jared Cook's about. We've seen what he can do.
Mm-hmm.
So his creativity is, he's not a conservative play caller like Matt Patricia. You're not going to be able to just, dial up, what Pettin normally would and stop the Saints. So I definitely worry a little bit about the defense in that way. The Saints have one of the best offensive lines in the league as well. So getting pressure on Brees, while I think that's the way to stop him, is going to be that much more difficult. So I think this is not on the offense. Even though the Saints have quite a good defense, I think Matt Lafleur will find a way to get around their pass rush.
Mm-hmm.
It's on Pettin this week.
Do you think Kenny Clark, if he isn't able to go, will have an even bigger impact than it would have, we saw last week against Detroit?
Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Alvin Kamara is, like Aaron Jones, he's incredibly dynamic, and
Yeah.
he is a threat in the pass game as well. And I think without Kenny, our in general, our defensive line's a little weak. And without him, it's not it's not a great sign. They also have Latavius Murray, who is a nice 1-2 punch, just like Jamal Williams is for us.
Mm-hmm.
So we're very evenly matched. It's going to be a really, really good game.
Mm-hmm. I think so too, and it should be fun since it's on Sunday Night Football as well. All right, last question for you. Looking at the wide receiving core just a little bit, you got Davante Adams dealing with that hamstring. Hopefully he'll be able to go on Sunday. What is kind of your thoughts on this receiving core, and were you disappointed in what they did in the draft, or do you think they have enough talent there? And we've kind of seen that Rodgers is spreading it around, and he trusts a bunch of different receivers now, and hopefully his confidence can maybe lean over to these wide receivers. But what are your thoughts so far on this wide receiving core a couple of weeks in?
Yeah. So to answer your draft question,
Mm-hmm.
the only reason I was disappointed we didn't draft a wide receiver is because the level of just like the talent in this draft, I thought that was just like a missed opportunity. Mm-hmm. Not so much because we needed someone this season, as I don't think rookie wide receivers contribute nearly as much as people think they do, but just like for the future, right? So that was my only disappointment. Personally, I like our receiver core. I think that with what Lafleur is doing, we see a lot more, 2 tight end sets, a lot more 2 running back sets, or full back if you want to put DeGuara back there. So there's just less, spread offense, 5 receivers on the field now. So I was never really concerned because I think schematically we're not going to need that many. And we've really only seen Adams, MVS, and Lazard, on the field at the same time. I think that Lazard and MVS are doing so far everything that we would expect them and want them to, as being those sort of wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3, options. Davante Adams is having, and I said this after the Vikings game, like Davante Adams, barring he stays healthy, I think is about to have an all-pro season. He just looks like he is in another category than anybody else. And so when you have someone like that, you don't need Lazard and MVS to be magic. You just need them to execute their assignments, and they're doing that.
Mm-hmm. Final thing, where can people find the Packs What She Said podcast this weekend, and what do we got coming up in the next couple of days leading up to this Saints game and just after that?
Sure. Yeah. So you can just follow me on Twitter at Perri_Goldstein. It's Perri, Perri. Everything's on there. But if you follow at PWSS podcast, you'll get all the updates on Packs What She Said. I will be breaking down on Pack-A-Day on Monday with Andy and Alex, the Saints game. So if you want to hear our immediate reaction thoughts there after the game on Sunday, you can listen to that. And happy hour on Monday, we'll also be discussing the Saints game. You can find us at Game On Wisconsin. We'll also be streaming through Twitter. So you just have to follow Game On Wisconsin on Twitter and you'll see it.
Absolutely. Well, you should definitely do it. And Perri, really appreciate the time today, and super fun to talk Packers with you. And hopefully we can do it again down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime, Hunter. I had a lot of fun and really appreciate it.
That is Perri Goldstein. You can follow her on Twitter, like she said, at Perri_Goldstein, and find her work at the Pack-A-Day podcast and the Packs What She Said podcast and Game On Wisconsin, always providing great Packer content. And really loved talking to her and hearing some of her insight on the Green Bay Packers and being a Packers fan in New York. I thought that was really interesting. Just, the small community of Packers fans that is there. And, of course, Aaron Negler of Cheesehead TV is there. And of course, the Green Bay Packers are 2-0, and it was fun to hear her insight on Mike Pettin, kind of her expectations throughout the year, what we should be looking for with him. Some different things with Aaron Jones, right? Should the Packers re-sign Aaron Jones? Should they not? We'll kind of see what happens in the coming weeks. Will he demand money like Alvin Kamara and Dalvin Cook? She thinks maybe just the personality wants to grow roots in Green Bay, maybe not. So we shall see how that all pans out, but really exciting and really fun this discussion with Perri this week right here on the Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. So thanks again to Perri for joining me. Remember, you can watch or listen to the podcast. You can watch on YouTube or listen on SoundCloud. Simply search Hunter Baumgardt Sports Podcast. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at HunterBOnAir. Also, feel free to like the Facebook page, Hunter Baumgardt Sports. Packers and Saints on Sunday Night Football this weekend. The Packers, I think I agree with her. The Packers are pretty much the cream of the crop, along with maybe the Seahawks in the NFC. Russell Wilson having a great start to the season. Saints are a notch below, but like she said, don't count them out, especially in the Superdome, especially if they're going to allow some fans in there. The Saints are going to come to play in their home stadium, and that is one of the toughest places to play, even with limited fans in the NFL. So don't expect this to be an absolute blowout like last Sunday's was against Detroit. That would be my prediction. But man, Aaron Rodgers has looked phenomenal. Aaron Jones, even maybe more phenomenal than Aaron Rodgers on Sunday afternoon against Detroit. So this should be a lot of fun. Thanks so much for watching or listening. Talk to you next week. And as always, stay positive.